Hi guys, Akiba and Jason back for the next episode of SlateAsia podcast. Hope you're all doing well. It's been a couple of weeks. We're gonna have a chat with Jason, who's over in Taipei now, and see what's going on in the Asian markets. Jason, how are you doing, my friend?
Dude, it's been a while. How are you?
I'm good. Lots of crazy things going on today. I know you're currently at Taipei Blockchain Week. Sora
Yes.
Ventures has recently moved to Taiwan, as we reported the other day.
Yeah.
First of all, how was the move? Was it nice and straightforward? Any issues?
Yeah. So we're still like obviously setting up companies and hiring, relocating that takes time, but we made the announcement that we're going to move to Taiwan. And the first question a lot of people ask me, especially the ones in Singapore, are why Taiwan, not Singapore, right? And I
Hmm.
think the easy question, for my response, my understanding is there's a lot of obviously entrepreneurs and people in our space and from Asia that move to Singapore mainly because they're Chinese. So the background between China and Taiwan right now is like it's very difficult for Chinese, like mainland Chinese, to actually move to Taiwan. And so really the only option they have is Singapore
Hmm.
or Hong Kong, right? Which obviously there's a good amount of companies in Hong Kong, but moving forward, I think Hong Kong will be less and less livable, especially with kind of like where we're seeing right now. But the point is, I think if you have access to Taiwan, Taiwan would be a better kind of like a more crypto-friendly environment. And the biggest and for that because Hong Kong and Singapore, for example, they have a framework, a regulatory framework. They have committees that work towards making this much more regulated. They more like a black and white framework, right? So you know
Hmm.
clearly there's certain things you got to do, and in order to do these things, you need to have licenses. Whereas I think Taiwan is still more of they're still in the early days where they're like in the gray area where they're figuring out things out. And so if we're in the front line where we're investing on some early techs where some of these techs are way ahead of what regulatory system will ever be able to catch up to, in general, like for example, we were investing in NFTs when NFT wasn't a thing. um, that type of environment actually works out very well for us. And so
Hmm.
being in Taiwan, we have the full spectrum to kind of like explore use cases of blockchain, not just in kind of NFT and DeFi what we're seeing now, but beyond that, what's the next
Hmm.
big thing? And honestly, some of the things that we invest in, generally it is a form of experiment in our industry. But again, we're a VC. This is just a thing. These are the type of things that we're okay taking certain risks on. But more importantly, I think it's also kind of like directs the industry in a way that potentially could be disruptive.
Hmm.
We've seen that with NFTs. I mean, we're one of the early funds that invested in NFTs in early 2018.
Hmm.
When most Asian funds were betting on STOs, and obviously
Yeah.
the STOs didn't work out. So again, every fund had their own direction, but I think I like to be in an environment where about one, they're open about new ideas, like beyond what we're seeing in the industry, and two, we have the full set flexibility to kind of like be vocal about it, to kind of share the ideas what we think the industry could be. And that's really important for us. And I think Taiwan kind of serve that as a potential platform in Asia, much better than places like Singapore and Hong Kong.
I think it's really interesting. So there's companies that are either moving out or setting up specific entities in the US, given the uncertainty around regulation. I mean, Exo very recently announced that they were pulling out of the US because there wasn't a clear framework, and that was a company that had tried to get licenses. Some more licenses than they needed to try and be really ahead of the regulation, and they've decided that because of the uncertainty, the arguments between the CFTC and the SEC, that they're just pulling out. Whereas you're saying that there's a black and white framework in sort of Hong Kong, but you're wanting to move to Taiwan where things are in a more grassroots stage. Why is it that you prefer a different type of regulatory environment? You're not looking for that black and white. Is it because it's too strict, or what's the thinking there?
Yep, great question. The straight logic is because regulators are always slower than builders than
Right.
companies in their space, and sometimes these restrictions can be beneficial for retailers, especially those who don't know crypto, who are new to
Hmm.
crypto, who are just started exploring crypto and blockchain use cases. But for us who've been in the industry, who really know what we're doing, that's very different for us. We want to be in an environment where, we have the full flexibility of investing in things and talk about things and share about things that may at this point may not actually be in kind of the topic of regulators, but potentially
Mm-hmm.
could be in many years to come. And right now, if you're seeing kind of like what we're seeing in Hong Kong and Singapore, they're still very kind of early stage of figuring out how DeFi works and how exchanges work. I mean, we spoke about that last time in the podcast, which is
Mm-hmm.
like this entire FTX collapse is just just another kind of like kind of like a decision for a lot of regulators to kind of figure out, okay, have we been kind of like regulating this space in the right direction? Is there anything that we got to like go back to the drawing board and then figure out like what are the missing pieces, right? And I honestly, like, for us, we're not going to be waiting for regulators to figure out
Right.
what is the
Okay.
proper framework, right?
So,
We're
so
just going to be,
it's around the innovation and the disruption that you're looking
yeah,
to
I mean,
carry on with new things that haven't quite been
right,
regulated and maybe don't
they will figure out,
fit with
that's their
regulations that are
job.
there.
Yeah, exactly. They'll figure out that part themselves, right? Because that's their job, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not going to be like a smooth ride, and just like there's going to be things that it's like, okay, they think this is going to work, and then something happens in the industry, and then they go back and they go back two steps and figure out again. Whereas for us, we're a VC fund. We're gonna have like we're gonna invest in, like, for example, 100 companies, and most of the companies will end up failing, and that's just part of the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the ones that end up doing really well, it's because we took risks, because we're willing to explore with them. We're willing to kind of go take certain risks where these are areas that could potentially be disruptive using blockchain technology, but we're not sure if the application will actually work out. And it's
Mm-hmm.
really the VCs going to be backing these applications, backing these companies, backing these entrepreneurs. It's not going to be the regulators who's like backing these guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So obviously, at the moment, I mean, SVF's just been arrested. Apparently, news has come out, and there's a bit of foot around kind of Binance, BUSD starting to move off its peg. Obviously, you're at Taipei Blockchain Week at the moment. What's the general vibe at the moment around sort of the industry and maybe Binance specifically?
Yeah. So regarding with Taipei Blockchain Week, I've actually I think it, like, even after FTX collapse, and like I mentioned from last podcast, I think Taipei is one of the major, definitely one of the major, like, country or city that that were like obviously hit really bad, especially Taipei, right? Where most of the blockchain uh, most of the blockchain companies are based in Taipei, and I think most of the people who got hit really bad are also from Taipei. And so, regardless, I think the amount of people who showed up was like overwhelming. I mean, it was packed, and people were still interested in crypto. People were still kind of learning about crypto, and so I actually thought that was great. I thought, obviously there were a lot more people show up than expected. Um, Even from kind of like the things I've heard, where certain people, a lot of people in Taiwan in general just lost money from FTX, like a lot more than it was a lot worse than the Lehman Brothers time, right? So,
Yeah, you
with
mentioned,
that
yeah.
said, yeah, with that said, I think I think overall it still shows there's a huge interest in the Taiwanese community. Now, regarding with Binance, I personally think that I think Binance is very safe. I've obviously like Binance was based in Shanghai, like back in the early days, right? Where they operated in Shanghai, and this was like 2017, 2016, right? And so, um, they a lot of people that I knew in Shanghai that were kind of like back then. We all had the chance to kind of meet with CZ and work really close with him. And personally, I think he's like a very conservative guy, right? He's a very conservative guy, and he'll play things safe. And so, even with just like the recent, like, halt in with like the withdrawal halt from like USDC, right? I think it's more of a strategic angle where Binance is doing their best to basically get people to BUSD over USDC, right? This is it's more of a strategic play. I think it's actually quite smart. I mean, even though USDC is obviously one to one, and it's regulated. Binance is doing whatever they can to kind of build up that BUSD And I think with a lot of recent FUD, it could be, it just could be commissioned by like, their competitors or other parties. But in general, I think I wouldn't be worried too much about Binance. I would still feel like if Binance go down, then obviously there's going to be a huge impact in our industry, and everyone will have to kind of rethink about this industry. But kind of based on what I know and how to like work with Binance in the past, I think they have more than enough asset to cover. Like if everyone decided to withdraw, I think they'll be fine as well.
What do you think to Justin Sun? Sort of he tweeted out that he deposited 100 million onto Binance. Do you think that we talk about competitors? Do you think he's someone that is working with or against Binance, or are you not really able to comment? What's your thought?
Yeah, my understanding of Justin Sun is that he actually has a very good relationship with Binance, specifically with He Yi, which is the CMO, and now she's leading the Binance Labs. And they've worked very closely together. Well, I mean, if you remember back in the days, there was BitTorrent, the BitTorrent launchpad that did really well. So just on that, I'm sure the relationship is like obviously very tight and very close, right? I mean, there's a lot of trust going on. I mean, the fact that I think also Justin not being publicly as the CEO of Huobi also signals that he's more of an advisor, right? That's what the title is. It's also a signal that he wants to be more neutral. Like he's not here to attack competitors. I think if anything, I think what I'm specifically referring to is Coinbase versus Binance. Yeah, which is like specifically BUSD versus USDC. I think this is where the competition is going through right now.
We saw USDD on Tron start to depeg a little bit yesterday. Is there any talk or rumblings as to motivations or how that might likely play out?
I think it's too early. I think even though obviously I do think there's a lot of stuff going on behind what the peg and the project. I think in general, the way I look at USDD is that it's still a very, very early stablecoin. That I wouldn't obviously compare to USDC or major other even Paxos, for example. I think Paxos will still be a lot safer than USDD, just because they're really packed by one, right? So not much to comment on that because I do think they're still early. So depegging in such an early stage for stablecoin, in my opinion, is very normal. Yeah.
Do you think does it raise the risk profile? So just having a quick look here on the data, obviously it depegged down to 0.95 during the Terra Luna crash, but so did everything because of just exit liquidity. Then it dropped again to 0.97 during the FTX kind of revelation. It then started to regain its peg again to 0.99, and then since the start of December, it's been sort of slowly declining back to that 0.97, which is where it's currently at now. It's had a little bit of a bump. Do you think is all of that then just market liquidity and sort of thing, that it's just the lag between redemptions and sort of on exchange trading? Would that seem feasible?
Yeah, look, I think for like I said, right? I mean, if you look at the market cap right now, core market cap is around 700 million. That's not a lot. And yeah, I mean, you look at the trading volume, I'm seeing 100 million. So that's not a lot as well. So point is, I think the stablecoin is relatively early, and the stablecoin is relatively small compared to other stablecoin. If USDT depegs to that level, I would be very worried, right? But for something like USDT, I think that is normal. I mean, 5%, even if it goes up to 10%, I think would be relatively normal. Yeah, unless it hits to somewhere like top 10 on CoinMarketCap, where it's in the billions. If you look at the 10th place right now, 7.8 billion. Yeah, if you look at the billions, then it's like this is much more significant, right? Right now they're 700 million. I mean, 100 million trading volume, that's really nothing, right? I mean, a single fund can probably pull that off in 24 hours if they wanted to. So, yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. I mean, if you put a couple $1,000 in there, it should be safe in the long term. But obviously, wouldn't advise putting anything greater than 100 mil or anything significant if your market cap is only 700 mil. That's just it's just like logic.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see if we've got stable coins.
Yeah.
So it's number 7 at the moment in terms of market cap, behind True USD and Paxos, etc. But yeah, like you say, like the difference in market cap between the others, and obviously this has been getting closer. The Tether USDC has been getting closer all year. But the thing that I've been the most impressed with is Tether's a bit, regardless of the FUD, like Tether's ability to honor redemptions, because this was up at like 80 odd billion at one point, and the pegs remained fairly stable throughout. And if you look at, like, say, I know it's not a bank, but you look at banks, for instance, Northern Rock in the UK, that was only 5% withdrawals from customers that caused the whole bank to collapse. Like, you look at the percentage of funds that have been able to be being withdrawn from USDT, and it's still just cracking on. Like, yeah, it had a wobble down to 0.99 back here, but all in all, it's very strong. I think. Is this evidence to you that stable coins are and can be more resilient than the traditional financial system?
No, 100% no.
Why is that?
Stablecoin, in my opinion, stablecoin. Well, it depends on which stablecoin we're referring to. But for Tether, if Tether's market cap surpasses Bitcoin, I would be very worried about Tether.
Because
because a big part of Tether's balance sheet, to my understanding, is pegged to Bitcoin. If Bitcoin prices goes down, then Tether, in theory, would not have that much money to peg 1-to-1, right? In the early days of Tether, that's how they started as well. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, is there anything else in the sort of the Asian markets at the moment that you think's pertinent that we should be looking at?
Well, yeah. I mean, like, I think stocks in general are doing quite well. We had a lot of discussion in terms of what the Bitcoin price would be during kind of the Taipei blockchain week meetup. I think, generally, I think people there's two groups, right? There's a group that people feel that, okay, if Genesis goes down, the question now is, what would happen to Grayscale, right? Like
For sure.
yeah, and it's a matter of, like, and if they don't go down now, like in 6 months, are they going to go down, right?
Yeah.
So
And then the impact on DCG as well, and the portfolio companies under them.
Right. So there's the question of, like, how long can they survive, and it's just a matter, like, are they basically dead, or just a matter of time that this gets basically the these corpses just basically get float, and people start kind of like seeing these corpses, right? We don't know that yet, but the obviously the optimistic side is that Genesis survives, and all these portfolio companies under DCG survives, and then I think that would mark as a kind of a rebound signal. I think it's like for Bitcoin, but the thing is, I think we can all agree, is that whatever FTF kind of led to, like, whatever happens after FTX is going to be smaller. It's going to be the impact will be smaller than FTX. Again, this is the assumption that Binance, nothing happens to Binance. But again, I am pro Binance right now. So I feel like kind of based on my understanding of like CZ and kind of like how Binance operates and everything they do, I think Binance is definitely safe, relatively safe compared to other exchanges, just because their balance sheet is going to be much larger. But assuming Binance is safe, I think you know there's a lot of funds right now, including us, that start picking up Bitcoin at this range, and we'll be okay if Bitcoin even drops to like 13K. That's within our range of buying.
Would you have an interest, or do you know of anyone that would actually be interested in investing in Genesis? I mean, there's $1 billion hole that or over $1 billion that they've been shopping around. You talk about whether they can survive. That it looks like they need that money, and it looks like no one's interested in talking to them. Can you see a way out for them at this point? Is it an investment that has any upside?
I think it's going to have to be a combination, right? So I think it's going to be a combination of potential investment, but also DCG figuring out how to borrow and companies willing to lend, perhaps not directly from Genesis, but perhaps from DCG, other portfolios, or they have to sell certain portfolios to make up the cash for it. I mean, these are all kind of combinations that I can think of that would save Genesis.
I think, well, I mean, I did a deep dive into DCG's portfolio, and the biggest part is Genesis and Grayscale. So in terms of them getting access to the sort of funds that Genesis needs, it seems, require either closing down Grayscale to get back access to their Bitcoin, which would end up with them liquidating a lot of Bitcoin, or
Yes.
I don't know. I think it's I won't quote myself on this, but if I remember rightly, it's around about 5-6 billion in terms of their valuation of what they own, with about 1 to 2 being within Grayscale and Genesis. Meaning there's not a lot of other collateral that they could put up in order to get a loan from somewhere. So it does seem that DCG may be stuck between a rock and a hard place a bit at the moment.
Yeah, potentially. We don't know. I definitely don't know from how what are some strategies they're thinking about, but um, what I do know is that you know the market is efficient. If that day does come, I think the price will get reflected. I mean, to some extent, I do think the price is being reflected on that. I mean, I'm sure like people assume certain risk will obviously is there, and so I'm sure people have taken the position to sell Bitcoin already. So even with that news and knowing that kind of like there's a possible risk of liquidation from both Genesis and Grayscale, I think the market is still relatively holding quite well. And this goes back to what I was saying. I think if FTX, something as big as FTX collapsing, and this was to happen like 2018, I would assume the price would be much lower than what, in terms of the percentage wise, it would be much lower than what we're seeing right now. I mean, you look at Ethereum, they held really well. Bitcoin, I'm just shocked that it's still like 17K. I'm just
Well, for
I'm
me,
just
it's a factor in the fact that, yes, Bitcoin is the kind of representation of the crypto market, and everything leads that, and things in the market also affect Bitcoin. But none of the events that have happened this year have actually got anything to do with Bitcoin. Bitcoin has carried on being Bitcoin throughout 2022, and Terra Luna collapsing isn't Bitcoin's fault. The technology, the blockchain, the network, the infrastructure, FTX collapsing isn't anything to do with Bitcoin. It will be reflected in Bitcoin's price. But for me, it's what we're seeing is weeding out of people and projects in the space that are trying riskier strategies, that, if anything, it just makes a bigger use case for Bitcoin and the transparency of the network. And so for me, if I'm a fund that believes in blockchain, actually these companies that aren't sustainable collapsing without there being like a hack on Bitcoin in some form would be disastrous. But we're not seeing any of that. Bitcoin's carrying on working. Lightning is increasing. The Lightning network is increasing. So for me, yeah, like it's just cheaper Bitcoin because it's something that's not Bitcoin related, causing the price to go down. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
Yes, I would think. Obviously, our industry has grown so much bigger to a point that it's correlated to the equity market too, right? So
Okay.
there are a lot more players than who just like looks at Bitcoin as a Bitcoin technology wise, right? I mean, this is more of an alternative asset where I think a lot of people are hedging against USD or fiat currency too. There's a lot saying that like if China and US goes to war, then Bitcoin will go up, right?
Yeah.
So and there's a lot of speculation that says China might go to war with the US before the next election too. So could be possible over like like sovereignty over Taiwan, whatever, right? But the point is there is with the kind of the new committee from kind of from Chinese side, the third term, the people they have in there, it sounds like there's a possibility. It seems a lot more likely that China might be preparing for something that's closer to what we call quote unquote war, but we'll have to see, But regardless, I think if that were to happen, I mean, like Bitcoin will definitely go up.
I'm muted. Wait, let's leave it there for this
Yes.
episode of
Yeah.
the SlateAsia. It's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you again, Jason, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Hopefully, war hasn't started by then, but hopefully
Yeah.
also some of the FUD in the market has gone away. It'll be interesting to see how Bitcoin performs throughout the rest of December. So enjoy the rest of Blockchain Week. And we'll see all of you, and I'll see you, Jason, in a couple of weeks.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. Cheers. Bye, everyone.
Cheers.